I never thought I'd end up here, honestly. My name's Mark and my wife Lisa has always been a bit of a bitch, but I loved her. We got married about 5 years ago and things seemed fine, or at least I thought they were. She was gorgeous, confident, a little manipulative sometimes, typical Lisa. She's the type who loves to throw around her looks and her wit, and she's always had a sharp tongue. But I figured that was just her personality, part of what made her Lisa. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but I was content. We had a nice house, good jobs, me working overseas a lot for some international company and her running her own boutique. She was the classic social butterfly, always out with friends, always on her phone. I didn't suspect anything was wrong, at least, not until the signs started popping up. Little things at first. Missing phone calls, late nights she'd brush off with some bullshit excuse about a dinner with her friends or a business meeting. I was busy too, so I let it slide. I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. Then there was the first real red flag. I was away on a trip about 2 months ago when I received an email from our home server, an automated message about a malware infection. It was strange, but I didn't think much of it until I checked the email logs and I saw activity I couldn't explain. There were multiple login attempts from IP addresses I didn't recognize, and what caught my eye was a string of encrypted messages that were somehow linked to my wife's email account. I couldn't open them at the time, security measures, I suppose, but the metadata alone was enough to make my stomach turn. When I got back home, everything felt different. Lisa was more irritable, snapping at me about the smallest things. She was always busy and secretive about her phone, hiding it when I was around. I noticed she changed her password on our shared Wi-Fi, and her behavior was just off. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake this gnawing suspicion. I started digging a little, looking into her social media, checking her messages when she wasn't looking. That's when I found it, the messages. Hidden behind a supposedly innocent chat with her best friend, but what was underneath was a lot darker. I saw texts where she was talking to some guy, calling him babe, saying how much she loved the thrill of sneaking around. I found photos of her with him, apparently taken during their secret meetups. She was lying, all right, lying to my face, to her friends, everyone. And what made it worse? The man she was cheating with, his name is David. He's our hostage crisis negotiator. Yeah, I know, it's like a bad movie. Turns out, while I was being held hostage overseas during some supposed negotiation, she had been planning this affair with him. They had a whole secret affair, and the worst part, I found evidence that they were planning my kidnapping together. That's right. The ransomware I mentioned earlier. It turned out to be a trap. The malware that infected our system wasn't just some random virus. It was something they planted, probably with David's help, something designed to make my rescue mission fail. The messages showed they'd been plotting to keep me out of the picture for good, and Lisa was in on it. She was supposed to pretend she cared, act like she was worried about me, but behind my back she was orchestrating my downfall. I remember staring at the screen, my heart pounding. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My wife, the woman I trusted, was a traitor. She had been lying for months, maybe longer. And the man she was cheating with wasn't just some random guy. He was the guy I was supposed to trust to save me. The irony hits hard now, but at the time I was just furious, crushed, shattered. How could she do this? How could she betray me, not just emotionally, but in such a calculated, malicious way? It was like a betrayal on every level. I didn't sleep that night. I sat alone in the dark, staring at the screen, replaying everything I'd uncovered. The person I thought I knew was gone. Lisa was a liar, a manipulator. She lied to my face for months, and now I had proof that her lies weren't just about her cheating. They were about her actively working against me, even when I was overseas risking my life. It's one thing to be cheated on. It's another to find out she was part of a plan to see me dead or humiliated. That's a whole new level of betrayal. I knew I had to confront her, but I also didn't want to rush into anything before I had a plan. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. So I kept all the evidence safe, and I started thinking about my next steps. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. But I also knew I couldn't let her see me like this, not yet. I needed to be smart. I needed to figure out how to turn this betrayal into something she'd regret forever. The next morning, I woke up feeling like my head had been run over by a truck. The shock was settling into a kind of numbness, but underneath it all, there was this burning rage. I knew I had to be careful. Lisa's the type who's good at spinning lies, and I wasn't about to let her gaslight me into doubting myself. I needed proof, a way to confront her without giving her the chance to deny everything. First thing I did was change all our passwords, email, social media, everything. No way was she going to keep sneaking around unchecked. Then I started looking into her phone. I knew she kept it hidden, always sliding it away when I came close, but I was determined. I grabbed her purse when she wasn't paying attention and checked her messages. Nothing obvious, but I knew better than to trust appearances. I already had the evidence from the servers, so I didn't need to dig much deeper there. But then I decided to take it a step further. I installed a keylogger on her laptop. Nothing obvious, just a little background program I set up remotely. I wasn't planning to watch every second, but I wanted to catch her in more lies, see if she slipped up. I knew she'd be suspicious if she noticed, so I kept it subtle. That night I stayed up late, pretending to sleep while I monitored her activity. I was nervous but also excited. This was my chance to finally see her true colors in real time. Sure enough, a few hours later, she started messaging someone again. I saw her open her laptop and start typing. I recognized the name instantly, David. My stomach clenched. The messages weren't just flirtatious, they were planning. She was telling him where I was, what I was doing, asking if he was ready to meet. It was clear they had a whole secret life. The way she spoke, the tone, it was cold, calculated. She wasn't just cheating, she was actively conspiring with him to keep it from me. That was the final straw. I couldn't believe I'd been living with someone who was capable of this level of deception. My mind raced, trying to process everything, but mostly I was furious. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I planned to confront her hard, but I wanted to do it right. I needed her to admit everything, to see her squirm so I'd have concrete proof of her guilt. I didn't want some emotional blow-up that I'd regret later. I wanted to stay in control. I started mapping out what I'd say. I needed to be calm but firm. I wanted her to know I wasn't stupid. She'd been caught red-handed. I also knew I had to be prepared for her spinning some crazy lie, so I drafted a script in my head. I knew she'd deny everything at first. She always did. That bitch loves to lie her way out of trouble. But I had the evidence now, and I'd make sure she understood that. I knew everything. The night finally came. I told her I wanted to talk. She looked annoyed, already sensing something was up. She was demanding to know what, but I just kept my cool. I laid out the facts, how I discovered her messages, the malware, the planning. Her face twisted. She went from angry to defensive in a heartbeat. She started with the typical gaslighting. You're overthinking things, you're paranoid, you don't trust me. But I didn't back down. I told her I knew about David, about the plans, about her lying to my face for months. She blinked, then tried to deny it all, but I had the receipts. I pushed her on the spot, asking her why she'd betray me like this, why she'd risk everything, even my life, over some guy. Her response was classic Lisa. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, like she thought she was untouchable. "It's none of your business," she snapped. "You're not the only one who's been hurt here." That hit me hard. I realized then that she didn't care about the damage she'd done. She was just mad I found out. She threw in some accusations about me being away. So much about how I didn't pay enough attention, how I was never there for her. But I knew she was just trying to shift the blame to make herself the victim. She was so good at lying, so good at pretending she was innocent, but I saw through her. What really disturbed me was the coldness in her eyes when she talked about David. There was no remorse, no guilt, just a kind of smug confidence, like she thought she'd gotten away with everything. That's when it all started to sink in. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal of the worst kind. She'd been planning to see me humiliated or dead, and all I could feel was a deep, burning sense of loss. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, was a manipulator who'd sell me out for her own twisted pleasure. I remember standing there, watching her lie through her teeth, and feeling a strange mixture of rage and sadness. I knew I couldn't stay with her after this. I'd been blind for too long, but now I saw her for what she really was. I told her I needed space, that I'd be leaving for a while, and I packed a bag that night. I didn't want to lash out, but I knew I had to get away, to cool off, to think clearly. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew the marriage was over. That betrayal cut too deep, and I'd never trust her again. The days that followed were a blur. I threw myself into figuring out what the hell to do next. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat much. My mind kept circling back to her cold eyes, her lies, the fact that she'd been planning my downfall with a guy I once trusted. I stayed in a hotel nearby, pretending to be just passing through, but honestly, I was just trying not to explode every time I thought about it. Every minute, I was replaying her words, her actions, trying to piece together exactly how deep this betrayal went. I wasn't naive enough to think this was just a one-time thing. No, this was months in the making. The planning, the lies, the secret meetings. She'd been living a double life, and I was the idiot who didn't see it. The more I thought about how she'd manipulated everyone, her friends, her family, even me, the more I wanted to break something, especially David. That guy had been a part of this all along, and I knew I had to confront him too, but I was holding back for now. I needed to be smart. What really pushed me over the edge was when I stumbled on even more evidence. I'd started digging through old messages and in the process found some deleted files on her computer. I recovered them using some data recovery tools I had. There were conversations with David about getting rid of me, about how to make sure I never found out. It was like reading a script for a crime movie, except this was real. They'd been talking about how to stage things, how to make her story convincing if I ever got close to the truth. They'd planned everything to keep me out, to let her keep her secret life intact. I felt like I was losing my mind. All my trust, my sense of security gone. I'd always known Lisa was a bitch, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. She was capable of planning my kidnapping, planning my death just so she could be with David. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been married to a woman who was a master manipulator, who was willing to see me dead just for her own selfish desires. I was furious, yes, but also deeply hurt. How could I have been so blind? I decided I needed to talk to someone. I reached out to a close friend, Tom, a guy I trust implicitly, and told him everything. I knew I needed to get some perspective, to hear someone else's honest opinion. Tom was stunned, but he told me I was right to be suspicious, and he urged me to document everything. "Keep everything, Mark," he said. "Don't let her gaslight you again. You've got proof, and you need to act before she tries to spin some crazy story." With Tom's advice, I made a plan. I wasn't going to confront her again until I had everything gathered and a clear strategy. I also decided I'd be installing some security cameras around the house, just in case she tried to destroy evidence or pull something sneaky. I felt like I was preparing for a war. This was no longer just about betrayal, it was about protecting myself from an active threat. That night I stayed up installing cameras, keeping my phone charged, making sure I had a way to record everything. In the back of my mind, I knew I had to be careful. Lisa's the type who could turn hostile in an instant. She always thought she was smarter, better, more in control. Now I had to outsmart her. I wasn't going to let her ruin me like she'd planned. I kept telling myself I'd get through this somehow. I kept thinking about what I'd say when I finally confronted her again, but honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready. I just knew I couldn't keep living in this state of doubt, of betrayal. She crossed every line, and I was done being the fool. The strangest part was feeling a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that I finally knew the truth, but despair because I realized my marriage was over, and that I might never be able to trust her again. I'd loved Lisa, but now I see her for what she really is: a liar, a manipulator, someone capable of orchestrating my downfall. I didn't want to be with her anymore, but that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. It was like losing a part of myself, knowing I'd been blind for so long, and now I had to pick up the pieces of what was left. As I sat alone that night, staring at the blinking lights of the security cameras I'd just installed, I couldn't help but wonder what the hell I was going to do next. How do you rebuild after something like this? How do you trust anyone again after discovering the person you loved was willing to sell you out for a guy like David? All I could do now was prepare for the inevitable confrontation and hope that, somehow, I could find peace in all this chaos. The day finally came when I felt ready to face her again, or at least to try. I knew she'd be expecting me to come back, maybe apologize or beg for forgiveness like she always did when things got rough. But this time, I wasn't in the mood for her bullshit. I had my evidence, my plan, and a whole lot of anger I was finally ready to unleash. I told her I wanted to meet up just to talk. She acted all surprised, like she had no idea what I was talking about. Classic Lisa, pretending innocence, pretending she didn't know what I was talking about. She was so good at lying I almost believed it for a second, but I didn't let her get away with it. I laid out everything. The malware, the messages, the deleted files, the plans to make me disappear. I told her I knew about David, about how they had been planning everything behind my back. Her face flickered, maybe a hint of panic, but mostly that bitchy smirk she always wears when she's trying to manipulate her way out of trouble. She tried to deny it all, saying I was crazy, that I was paranoid, that I had no proof. I just showed her the screenshots, the recovered files, everything. Her eyes widened for a moment, then she started to get defensive. "You think I'd do something like that? After all these years? You're accusing me of murder." "You're overreacting," she snapped, but I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes. She was cornered. I told her, "You betrayed me in the worst way, Lisa. You were supposed to be my wife, my partner. Instead, you were planning to get rid of me to let David finish the job. All those nights I was overseas, you were busy breaking our marriage apart, cheating on me and plotting my demise. Well, I've got news for you. You're not getting away with it. Not this time." I could feel my voice trembling from the anger, but I didn't care. I was finally saying what needed to be said. Her reaction was to lash out, call me crazy, call me jealous. She threw in some of her usual "you don't trust me" lines, trying to spin it around. But I cut her off. I told her I had everything on her, proof that she'd been lying, cheating, and conspiring. That she'd been caught red-handed, and I was done being her idiot husband. I told her I was leaving, that I was done with her manipulations, that she'd burned every bridge between us. Her face turned red, and for a moment I thought she might yell or even attack me, but she just stood there, silent, defeated. That was a strange feeling, seeing her so powerless, so exposed. I'd always thought she was smarter than me, that she could twist her way out of anything, but now she looked like a rat caught in a trap. It was satisfying in a way. She finally realized she'd pushed too far, that her lies had caught up with her. I told her I was taking the evidence and leaving, and I did just that. I walked out of the house, never bothering to look back. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I moved out, stayed with Tom for a while, and filed for divorce. I knew she'd try to spin some story, maybe even turn her friends against me, but I didn't care anymore. I had everything I needed to prove her guilt, and that was enough to start rebuilding my life. The hardest part was the emotional fallout. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out. I could finally breathe again, even if the wounds were still fresh. In the following weeks, I went through her things, cleaned out the house, and set new boundaries. I cut off all contact. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who lied, cheated, and conspired to destroy me. That realization hurt a lot, but I also knew I had to move on. I couldn't keep living in this nightmare. Looking back, I learned some tough lessons. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can cut deeper than you ever expect. I also learned that sometimes the truth will come out no matter what you do, and when it does, you better be ready. The worst part of it all was knowing I'd been blind for so long, trusting someone who was willing to sell me out for a few cheap thrills. But I'm getting better. I'm healing. And honestly, if I could give one piece of advice to anyone else in a similar situation, it's this: don't ignore the signs. If something feels off, dig deeper. And when you find out the truth, face it head on. Don't let anyone, no matter how charming or manipulative, destroy your life without consequences. Because in the end, you're the only one who can truly protect yourself. After everything, I spent some time alone, trying to piece myself back together. It's hard to describe the emptiness I felt, like my entire world had been turned upside down. I kept replaying the moments I confronted her, trying to understand if I'd missed the signs, if I'd somehow been blind to her lies all along. But deep down, I knew. I had just refused to see the truth that was staring me in the face. The betrayal was so raw, so complete, it was almost like mourning a death. The thing that stung the most was realizing how much I'd invested emotionally. I'd loved her, trusted her, built a life around her. And it was all built on a lie. That realization made me question everything about my relationship, about myself, how I could have been so naive, so trusting. I felt foolish, angry, and sad all at once. The trust I, once given her, felt like shattered glass, scattered everywhere. It took a long time to accept that I'd lost not just my wife, but also my sense of security in the world. I threw myself into work, trying to keep busy, but even that was difficult. Every time I sat down at my desk, my mind drifted back to her, thinking about the way she looked when she was lying, the way she manipulated everyone around her, especially me. I kept asking myself what I could have done differently, why I didn't see the signs earlier, but I also knew that dwelling on it wouldn't change anything. I had to move forward no matter how painful it was. I started seeing a therapist. It wasn't about blaming myself. It was about understanding how I could heal from this kind of betrayal. Talking through everything helped, even if I still woke up some nights feeling the ache in my chest. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you resilience. I promised myself I wouldn't let her destroy my ability to trust again, that I'd be more cautious, more aware of the red flags. That's what life had taught me in the hardest way possible. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. As I moved on, I also kept a close eye on my safety. I didn't want her to have the power to hurt me anymore, so I changed my routines, set up protections around my new place, and kept my distance from her. I didn't want to be spiteful, I just wanted peace. I cut off all contact, blocked her on social media, and made it clear I didn't want to hear from her again. It was a hard choice, but necessary. The only way I could begin to rebuild my life was to cut the poison out completely. Some people told me I'd never trust anyone again, that I'd be paranoid forever. Maybe they're right, maybe I will be cautious, but I refused to let her define my future. I knew I needed to be stronger, smarter, more guarded. Not because I don't want to love again, but because I don't want to go through this pain again. I've learned that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, even from the people closest to you. And that paranoia, that cautiousness, sometimes it's a shield you have to wear to protect yourself. The hardest part now is forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for trusting her so blindly, for not seeing the signs sooner. But I've come to realize that forgiveness isn't about her. It's about freeing myself from that anger and pain. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. Every day, I remind myself that I deserve better, that I will find happiness again. I just have to be patient and cautious. Looking back, I see how this experience has changed me. I've become more skeptical, yes, but also more resilient. I've learned that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest, but that doesn't mean you have to stay broken forever. I'm slowly rebuilding my life piece by piece with the hope that someday I can trust again, maybe even love again. And when I do, I'll never take that trust for granted. Not anymore. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize how much I've learned about trust, about betrayal, and most of all about myself. I used to believe that love was about giving someone your whole heart, no matter what. I thought that if I loved her enough, she'd never hurt me. But I was wrong. Love isn't just about trust. It's about respect, honesty, and boundaries. Those are the things I overlooked, the things I took for granted because I was comfortable, because I was blind to the truth. Her betrayal taught me a hard lesson. Some people are capable of doing terrible things, and you can't always see it coming. It's easy to blame yourself, to think if only you'd been better, more attentive, more vigilant. But I've come to see that sometimes, no matter how careful you are, people hide their true nature well. And when that truth finally comes out, it hits you like a freight train. I've also learned that revenge isn't always about hurting someone else. Sometimes, it's about reclaiming your own peace. I never wanted to stoop to her level, but I did want her to understand that her actions have consequences. That's why I gathered the evidence, why I confronted her with everything. It was about justice for myself, about taking back control of my life. Today, I'm focused on healing. I've started rebuilding my confidence, reconnecting with friends, and rediscovering what makes me happy outside of that toxic relationship. I still feel the scars, deep ones, but I also see the hope of a better future. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because I now know who I am without her, the man who refuses to be a victim anymore. If I could give any advice to someone reading this who's going through something similar, it's this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how much you want to believe the best. When you find out someone you love has betrayed you, face it with strength. Be honest with yourself and don't be afraid to walk away if that's what you need. Sometimes the only way to heal is to cut out the poison. Most importantly, never let anyone make you feel small or unworthy. You are stronger than you think, and no betrayal can define your worth. Take your time, grieve if you have to, but don't forget, there's life after betrayal. You can come out of it more resilient, more aware, and ultimately more alive. I've learned that the hard way, and I hope someone else can find strength in my story. Because at the end of the day, the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie.